In episode 6, Serena wakes up and she gets ready for her doctor's appointment. She's going to have a sonogram. But she's surprised when the doctor arrives at the front door. He tells her that they are indeed having that doctor's appointment, but it's going to be at the house. They travel up the steps, and sure enough, the Wheelers have set up a practice in their house for Serena, so she doesn't have to leave. And Serena was kind of looking forward to getting off the property, but now she doesn't have to. After the sonogram, which, by the way, the baby looks healthy, all that good stuff, Serena needs to lower her blood pressure, but nothing out of the ordinary. The doctor, Dr. Landers, asks Serena to dinner. He tells her that the Wheelers convinced him to do it. He doesn't want to come off as a creep, but he, quote, admires her. Serena doesn't give an answer, but she's definitely a little creeped out. Later on in the day, Serena sees Alanis, and she gingerly brings up Dr. Landers, putting a feeler out there just to see what Alanis says. And Alanis starts talking him up, pointing out what a catch he is. So it's obvious that Alanis was behind most of this. And that's when Serena says that she doesn't really have any interest in dating her gynecologist. To be quite honest, she doesn't know if she wants to remarry at all. And Alanis thinks that that's a horrible idea and flat out tells her, this baby cannot grow up without a father. You can't be a single mother. And Serena says, I'm not. I'm a widow. Serena gets so annoyed that she says, you know what, I'm going to go for a walk. But Alanis stops her, telling her it's too cold. You can't do that. And the two women get into it about what Serena can and cannot do. But Alanis puts her foot down, saying, Serena, get back to your room. And suddenly, Serena doesn't really feel like she has any control whatsoever what happens to her or the baby. She is very uncomfortable. She actually goes upstairs and she cries. Later that night, though, she gets called to meet with Mr. Wheeler. She figures it has to do with what her and Alanis talked about, but Ryan says, no, I heard about that, but I figure you guys will just figure it out on your own. No, what I wanted to tell you is they caught June Osborne in no man's land. Serena's a little shell-shocked and asks Ryan what's going to happen to her. And he tells her that he's going to send Ezra to meet up with June and he's going to take care of her. Meaning he's going to kill her. He doesn't trust that the Gilead police or the Eyes are going to deal with her, quote, properly. Serena says to Ryan, I want to go. And at first Ryan pushes back, but Serena keeps making the case that she wants to be there. She wants to see June die and reassure her child once he comes into the earth that the person who killed his father is no longer here. This impassioned plea ends up working and Ryan agrees to it, telling her that she can go with Ezra the next day, but if there are any issues, she's got to turn back around and head home. And she is very relieved. Now, over with June and Luke, they're scooped up, put in the back of a van, and transported to what seems to be a Gilead black site. Their photographs are taken, and as June is getting photographed, she asks, what is this? We're still in no man's land. Luke pipes up and says, we're refugees. We have asylum in Canada. But the mercenaries don't care. They lock them up and they let them sit. And Luke doesn't handle it well at all. For June, she's been through this before, but Luke starts thinking of ways to get out, talking too much. Eventually, June has to tell him to shut up. A little while later, the mercenaries come back to take June's fingerprints and verify who she is. And June asks, are you taking us back to Gilead? And they confirm, yeah, we are. So she tells them, tell your boss to call Commander Lawrence or Commander Blaine. But they're not taking orders from her, and they just push her back into the cage and lock it up. They then go to take fingerprints from Luke, but he tries to escape, and he ends up getting his ass beat pretty good. The next day, Luke mentions how the last time they didn't get to say goodbye, and he doesn't want that to happen again. And June says, well, it's not going to happen because we're going to stay alive. He says, June, when we get back to Gilead, they're going to execute us. And she tells him that when they were separated before, she never gave up hope. So don't start now. But when it comes time to go back to Gilead, the two are separated, for real this time. They say that Luke has asylum in Canada, so they're just going to drop him off at the border. But June is heading back to Gilead, and she's distraught. Not about the idea of heading back, but more so the idea of doing it without Luke, after she gave that speech about how they weren't going to leave each other. But there's nothing she can do. On the journey, though, her transport stops. Ezra gets on, and he tells the guards that Commander Wheeler has requested June Osborne. So they let June go with Ezra. They're in the middle of nowhere, and it's just Ezra, Serena, and the car. And when June sees Serena, she starts rolling her eyes like, you've got to be kidding me. The two women exchange some words. They're not pleasant. And then it gets time for June to get on her knees and die. Ezra pulls the gun out, and he's about to shoot June in the head, but Serena stops him, saying, you know what? I want to do it. Before she pulls the trigger, though, she makes June pray, and June says a prayer for their children, both Serena's and June's. When the prayer is over, though, Serena does not pull the trigger at June. She turns the gun onto Ezra and shoots him in the shoulder. He was wearing a bulletproof vest, so he's not dead, but he's definitely hurt and injured. And then, at gunpoint, Serena commands June to get in the car and drive. And a very confused June Osborne heads off with Serena Joy in the back seat. Now, not too far away, in Gilead, Aunt Lydia goes to check on Esther, and she is shocked because it turns out Esther is pregnant. She hasn't been promised to any home, which means she was having sex with somebody. Aunt Lydia starts doing the math, and she realizes that she must have had sex near Commander Waterford's funeral. And the only person that really makes sense for any of this would be Commander Putnam, because that's when Esther first met Putnam, and they were alone. So Aunt Lydia goes and has a conversation with a very upset Esther. She starts asking Esther how this happened, but Esther, understandably so, doesn't really want to give Aunt Lydia any information. She feels like it'll be used against her. But Aunt Lydia assures her it won't. And it takes a little bit more time, but Esther tells Aunt Lydia that Commander Putnam raped her. And she did nothing to give any indication that she was into it, but she was raped. And that's why she's pregnant. Aunt Lydia feels terrible. She starts apologizing to Esther for putting her in that position. But Esther says, no, you're not. They all do it. You know they do. You're not sorry. Esther then starts screaming at Aunt Lydia and forcing her to leave. Right after visiting with Esther, Aunt Lydia heads on over to Commander Lawrence's place to report Commander Putnam. But she's pretty disgusted because Commander Lawrence acts like it's no big deal that Esther was raped. In fact, he kind of looks at it like, we got the end result we wanted, a pregnant girl. Aunt Lydia can't believe that Lawrence is defending a rapist. But Commander Lawrence just excuses her, telling her, you've given me a lot to think about. Later that night, Lawrence, Nick, and Putnam all meet up together. They let Putnam know that Esther is pregnant, and they actually toast to it, joking that Putnam is going to single-handedly repopulate the entire country. Lawrence then says to think that such an impulsive and quick act could have such big political implications. And Putnam knows what he's talking about. So he tells Lawrence, your plans for New Bethlehem, they're dead. I know you don't see it yet, but it's just what's best for Gilead. And Lawrence says, this is actually a really good teaching moment for Commander Blaine over here. Except when you've been outplayed. But it turns out that Lawrence was actually mocking Putnam, because Putnam is the one who's been outplayed. The Putnams go out for dinner and everybody's staring at them because they know what Commander Putnam did. The word's gotten out. Commander Putnam, though, isn't really fazed by it until the eyes come for him. They tell him that he's been arrested, and then they bring him in front of Lawrence and Nick. Nick tells him that the High Criminal Court of Gilead, in a special overnight session, found him guilty. It was for the rape of unassigned property. Putnam starts making his case that Esther was his handmaid. She belongs to him. But technically, the rape happened the day before she was assigned. So because of this, he is guilty. Nick then pulls out a gun and shoots him in the head. When Nick gets home, his wife is pretty upset. She knows what Nick just did, and he tells her, you shouldn't be worrying about that kind of stuff. But Rose says to him, I'm just worried about the kind of person this makes you. And he says, I'm the kind of person that will make Gilead a safer place for our child. But Rose questions if he really did it for their baby or somebody else. Commander Putnam's body is then put on the wall, and Aunt Lydia brings all the handmaids around it and shows them, telling them that in Gilead there are consequences for disobeying God, no matter who you are or how powerful you are. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.